Hey, what's up, LinkedIn? My name is Jonathan Schofield, or Skofi, as you can call me, and you have just joined Skofi Sessions. And this is my shameless excuse to hang out with friends of mine, peers in the industry, people that are incredible, in my opinion, and to follow rabbit trails and have fun. And hopefully, you joining us today can get some value out of it. I'm very pleased to welcome Dean from Empath. And I'll give you a second to introduce yourself here in a second. But Dean has been a joy to get to know over the last couple of years as he and I have run into each other in the IT services ecosystem, and to follow his content and gain so much insight from him and his experience. And been a true pleasure to get connected with you, Dean, over the years. Today we have a very exciting topic to me, personally. Significant to me as an employer of people, as a manager of people, as a person who has been employed and managed by people, and as a aspiring business owner and venture builder myself. This is near and dear to my heart. So if you're joining us today, if you're scrolling LinkedIn or YouTube or whatnot, and you're here today, if you knew what you were jumping into, then you know already. Tech talent in 2025 is what we're going to be talking about. Basically, if you're in the IT services space, what does it mean for hiring, firing, building successful teams, and leveraging folks to grow your organization, and all the ins and outs of that? Dean's opinions, my opinions, for whatever they're worth. And if you don't, now you do. So welcome. Glad you're here. Dean, take a second to introduce yourself. Tell those of our stream who may or may not be familiar with you a little bit about you, and then we'll jump right into it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. Really glad to be here. I am Dean. Otherwise, many of you may know me as Dr. Zoidberg, and I have spent the last 15-ish years in this space, mostly on the MSP side as a service and operations manager. So eventually I sold my soul, gave up my credibility and my morality, and became a sleazy vendor, just like you, right? Vendors, we're on the dark side. And specific to today's topic, I was fortunate enough to work for an MSP that grew from itty bitty tiny to massive. So I have hired, fired, interviewed, and managed hundreds and hundreds of technical employees. And boy, have I learned from my mistakes. So
excellent. Thank you so much for that background and for introducing yourself, Dean. If you are watching the live, don't be shy. Say hi in the comments. Let us know where you're from, where you're watching from. Don't be afraid to be snarky. Dean promises to get me canceled today, so I'm very excited about that. I've never been canceled before, so that'll be a first.
I'm trying not to swear on the live stream because you've just started a new business, and we don't need to do that to you.
Oh, that's hilarious. I love it. I'm not scared. Okay, so you made a statement. You've hired and fired and managed hundreds of people, both from the vantage point of working with and for an MSP in the past, and you've worked with several vendors on the dark side here in recent past. And what I want to start this little rabbit trail with is let's talk first and foremost the status quo in the industry from the vantage point of primarily IT services. You are running an IT business, right? And you need folks to grow the business. What's the status quo in your mind as you look at the industry today that needs addressing?
It is kind of effed up, and for a variety of reasons. Some of them are out of our control, but at a high level, we predominantly are in a space where if we were to just pull a bunch of MSPs on here and ask, we would hear over and over again some form of, I can't find good talent. And one would think that remote work would magically solve that, but you still hear that I can't find good talent. On the flip side, if we go over, especially to Reddit, where a lot of employees hang out, our sysadmin, our MSP, our IT career questions, over and over, we just see all these people hungry for work in the IT space who say they can't find a job. And it's like that old joke, like two log trucks passing each other on the highway. Like if they need logs over there and they need logs over there, you'd think a phone call would have fixed it. That's basically the state of employment right now in our space.
Yeah, I see that a lot. You made a comment about maybe we thought remote work would solve that problem, and it seems like maybe that hasn't. Why not?
So that is a that is a spicy meatball to unpack. Employee culture has shifted dramatically over the last 40 years from where it sat pretty much from industrialization to the 80s. Management and hiring culture has not adapted at the same pace. And as a result, we have two groups that have drifted apart from really knowing how to speak each other's language, with a lot of predatory gamification sitting in the middle. So basically, modern employees have no idea how to apply for and optimize themselves to get a remote role. And I would say even more so, there's almost no MSPs I've met that know how to hire and actually properly manage and utilize remote staff. So as much as the availability of technical talent literally anywhere now existing should solve that problem, it's not really getting solved. And even in the cases where we hear people excitedly saying, oh, they have remote teams, if you dig into it, oftentimes things are not as rosy as their sort of Instagram version of their life would make you think.
As you were talking, it made me remember a conversation. One of those vendors you mentioned that I used to work for that we didn't specifically name, it doesn't need to be named, but when I was there, I distinctly remember going to management and we were kind of renegotiating salaries for some of the entry-level folks on staff at the time. We were trying to address this issue that we had where we would bring in someone that seemed to be pretty okay on paper.
Mm-hmm.
They interviewed well, seemed to be a good culture fit, and then they walk out the door 3 months, 6 months, 8 months later. It wouldn't stick around more than a year in a lot of cases. Sure. I posited that one of the reasons we were losing them was because we had an office. People came to the office and worked in the physical plant. But in the market where we were at the time, like the geographic market, salaries hadn't super changed that much for our industry. However, on the heels of 2020, COVID changed the remote workforce plausibility in an obviously dramatic way. And so I remember going and looking at not necessarily competitors, in some cases competitors, but peers in the channel, looking at job listings for some of these juggernauts in the space that I knew were fully remote. And I looked at the base salaries for some of these fully remote positions, and I went to leadership and I said, we might be losing folks because we are clinging to the physical plant, but we're not adapting other things. And the grass is looking really greener because they can go elsewhere for the same job. And I think a lot of IT providers that are not in those more affluent markets where talent expects to be paid that, the playing field has shifted a lot. So what an MSP used to be able to hire for 30K, 40K, 50K base salary, entry-level kid coming right out of school, perhaps, right? Doesn't get you the same thing anymore, right? What's your thoughts on all of that?
So salaries are an interesting conversation. We could have a whole episode on that on its own. And I will just give the caveat that research done by enough different organizations coming to the same conclusion, that is not going to be the only factor that generally motivates most people to get up and leave. It is absolutely a factor, and it's a big factor, but it's not the only factor. So just to get that out there, I don't actually think our industry had those good old days that we put the rose-colored glasses on and look at. We've been underpaying folks for quite a long time in this space. The IT industry in general has been doing that, but the for-profit side of the IT industry, which is mostly MSPs, VARs, whatnot, have been doing that for longer because the business model requires it to get started. And if you don't reach a certain maturity point where you're able to basically pivot your business model and your value proposition and no longer require it, you kind of perpetually require cheap labor. So most of our industry has always traditionally underpaid. And we know this if you compare any sysadmin employee group against an MSP employee group, there's a massive divide in the pay scale for basically the same requirements. And all y'all that have worked in or own an MSP, you all know that even probably like your most entry level or least experienced tech is probably more qualified to do most tasks than your like co-managed client's internal sysadmin. So this industry also tends to create very highly capable individuals. So the minute you realize, wait, I'm way more qualified than all these other sysadmins, and I'm getting paid half as much as them. And as you mentioned, wait, I can go work from home and make more money. Yeah, of course, somebody at that point is going to skedaddle. So if we know that is a kind of a given, that's where we need to adapt how we approach that. Those are the operating constraints of the environment we're in. We're not really gonna be able to change that easily. So how do we work around that and with that is really where employers in this space have not caught up.
I think I agree with you. Now, disclaimer, I've never worked for an IT service provider, though I have been in and around the channel for a good long while. And I've got so many peers in the space that do run these businesses. This is the status quo as I see it. And I'm going to tell basically a fictional story, but you tell me how true to life it sounds, right? A guy starts his MSP, right? Whether he came from corporate IT, or maybe he works for an MSP himself, or whatever the case may be. He gets his first couple of clients around him, and he hires his first person, right? Mm-hmm. And this is probably around when he's got between 500 and 700 endpoints. He's probably thinking, maybe I need someone else around here, right? And that person, if he hires fortunate, has a high probability of becoming a partner in the business or growing dramatically, and becoming that irreplaceable person that the founder ends up relying on significantly. That person builds their career and effectively becomes the one that builds the business for the founder in many cases. And then what happens is you're around, between 700 and 1,000 endpoints under management. And now you're starting to accrue talent around you. And usually it's that second individual that is responsible for architecting all of that. And that becomes a massive burden on that person, where the tribal knowledge and the relationships with the customers and the business acumen has flowered over the last several years. But down here below him, because he's been basically running the ship with very little wind in his sails, this becomes like a meat grinder where we bring people in and people leave, and we bring people in and we bring people leave. And then we're like, well, maybe automation, well, maybe this tool, maybe that tool. We start chasing shiny objects. Then we get this patchwork quilt of our own technical debt that we get so, we fuss at our clients for having, but then we have it ourselves because we've got bloated tech stack that now is more difficult to manage than the initial thing that we were trying to do for our customers. And now we're stagnating. Like those first couple of years between 0 endpoints under management and 1,000 endpoints under management seemed like we were going at a decent clip, and then referrals dried up, and now we can't focus on growing the business anymore because just keeping the wheels on the bus has become tremendously difficult. That's a story that seems like I have heard told back to me by partners and MSPs in the space time and time again. Are you hearing that too, Dean? And what's the answer?
I think that is extremely common and describes definitely the majority of MSPs. I would actually argue the majority of high-skilled service-based SMBs in general. And there's some psychological stuff happening there that the founder of that business, I let the founder off the hook a little bit, because the deck was stacked against them to begin with. If you think about it, somebody who's starting a business is going to be naturally entrepreneurial. There is a acceptance of a willingness to take risk, to drive something forward, and to kind of do what it takes. And if you take that initial MSP, what did all of them do when they got started? Anything. You need a website, I got you. You need a cable, I got you. You need a hand resolder your computer, I've got you. They would do anything, right?
Right.
And that made them successful. And we don't acknowledge this enough. That sloppy, hungry desire to do what it takes is what has made every single MSP in our space successful enough to be able to hire anyone. So what do you do, especially since that average profile of that entrepreneur is somebody who is earlier in their life, not necessarily young, but they probably haven't really ever had any professional management or hiring training or any of that. What are they going to do? They're going to hire someone that is similar to them, somebody that acts like, thinks like, and behaves like that. So they're basically going to hire or try to morph someone into a pseudo entrepreneur. That is not scalable. That's not a thing. And so whether or not you succeed with that first hire and get to finish that story the way you described or not, many MSP owners, that is the sum total of basically the management hygiene and hiring hygiene they have is, well, I know it made me successful, so if I go find another me, certainly they'll be successful. And that causes problems beyond the fact that in a relationship, that wouldn't be the best way to start a relationship with another human. If you think about it and extend it long term, well, that's kind of expensive. If everybody I'm going to hire kind of needs to be infinitely motivated, have a little bit of an entrepreneurial drive, a high risk tolerance, needs to be able to do a little bit of everything, move the ship forward in the absence of instruction, build it themselves, and wake up every morning happy to do that, that's an expensive person. And if I'm stacking my MSP with people like that, I'm not going to solve operational challenges at all that make it easier for me to hire a less expensive person, because why would I? If we go back to that very initial MSP, well, what would you and I tell an MSP in that stage? Hey, you got to focus. Don't try and offer everything to everybody. What's your ICP? Let's narrow it down. Let's limit your scope of services. We would give them all that advice and they would resist, because in their mind, doing everything is the only reason I am eating tonight.
That's right.
Well, employees, if we hire employees like that, that's the culture of our MSP. And so that MSP at that size you've talked about is typically still a do everything MSP in spirit, even if not in practice. So you're stuck now. You kind of can only hire people that have like 2 to 3 years industry experience coming in. These are people who are already aware that there is other grass, never mind how green it is. These are more expensive resources. They're more likely to have opinions. Oh, and because you're hiring risk-tolerant, entrepreneurial-minded people, they're sassy and they don't really give a shit. So at some point, they are going to leave. The dynamic has to change the same way you would eventually have somebody come in and tell you from a sales and marketing and client standpoint, listen, you got to focus. You got to do the same thing with your staff. And that's really the magical secret element here that connects back that previous conversation of remote workers and I can't find people. If your ICP is everybody, then you're never going to find an ideal client. And if you're ICP for employees is everybody, you're never going to find the right employees, and you're going to be in this perpetual cycle of churn and replace.
That's right. That's right. I want to take a moment to highlight the credit you just gave the founder, because I think that is never stated enough. If you are IT business owner and you've built something that's, on the doors of $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $5 million in revenue, and it's because you had that sloppy, hungry desire to do what it takes, as you said, Dean, that is exceptional. And you should be absolutely proud of that. Now, you may be tempted to feel burnt out at this stage because it may have taken you 18 years, 10 years, 5 years to get here to where you are. And you feel like you've hit that plateau. But I do think it's really important for you to take a moment to center yourself and acknowledge what you've put into the business. But Dean is right. Finding another you is not a scalable way to take you from 5 million to 10, to even take you from 2 to 3 million, honestly, because that is the diamond in the rough in the workforce, to find that person that needs a little oversight, can with minimal direction capture the vision and run it down the field entirely on their own based on initiative and a drive to be successful. And by the way, even if you find that person, you're going to have to facilitate that vision, and they're going to have to buy into that. And that's not easy. That's not easy. And go ahead.
I was going to say there's one other component there as you're describing that. Think about, so you're a small business owner yourself. If you made a massive mistake today that cost the company, I don't know, your biggest client or a lot of money, you're obviously not going to be happy. You're probably going to take ownership of that situation. But right away, because the company is so small, you know what decision-making factors you had that led you to that decision. Basically, you have 100% accountability and authority, right? Because you were infinitely accountable to you. So even if you agree it was a bad decision, you know why you made it. You're able to rationalize it, say, I've learned from it, I'm going to move forward. When we got on this meeting, we were working with one of Jonathan's most amazing employees, Jess. If Jess made that exact same super expensive mistake, you're not a bad guy. So you're not going to like yell at her. But right away, there's a degree of separation and accountability and authority. She may have had the authority to make that decision, that poor decision, and you may trust her to make it, but her brain isn't connected to yours. So you no longer have that live feed of every little bit of data that went into that. So there's a little voice in the back of your head that goes, I don't know that I would have made that same mistake. And the more you drift from having like complete like brainwave alignment with that person, the bigger that voice gets. So even if you can find another you, what about your ability to actually allow them to function as you? It is incredibly rare that we as managers are actually able to effectively manage every type of person, even if they are skilled to do it. And so that then becomes another breakdown to that whole scenario. And we see that a lot, right? We see a bitterness form between that first employee that helped grow the business and this sense of like, I'm maybe not like explicitly owed something, but I've done so much. And the owner tends to have this sense of I've put so much trust in you. And we all know an MSP where that is fractured and the owner gets upset, sad even, that the trust I put in Mini-Me was violated. They left. And Mini-Me is going, after 5 years at your company of building it, I still don't have whatever the thing is, equity, whatever I feel I should have. So I'm leaving. And objectively, as outsiders, we look at that and we almost, right? What do we almost kind of like, it's almost amusing. It's like, there was no violation of trust. Like, you're not their dad. And like, you weren't owed anything. You're an employee. Like, this entire situation is inherently irrational, but it happens because the initial premise that as a small business owner, I'm magically going to hire somebody that can do it the way I would do it, and I'm going to give them the authority and accountability the way I would apply it to myself, which is not possible. That's right. Sets you up to already almost be failing.
What you just described, you see showcased time and time again when IT providers merge with each other or buy each other. Because what happens, you get two entrepreneurs, each who built their business to a certain threshold, and then let's assume they're on some margin of equality, right? When I'm not talking about like a $20 million MSP buying a $1 million MSP. Let's say you're both within $1 million in revenue of each other, right? So you're more or less on par in the marketplace with each other. And what happens? Well, it's like, well, I'm going to be the CEO, and you who built your business, if you're going to stick around, you're going to run sales, or you're going to do this or that. And what happens, this misalignment and mismanagement of expectations, because, well, you are a guy who did this, and I'm a guy who did this. So when we come together, surely that multiplies. What happens is the hand doesn't know what the foot is doing often, right? So I think you're absolutely right. Same thing happens when you hire somebody in, giving them that expectation of being that owner. So even having the owner or expecting someone to be have that ownership mentality is not scalable. So that's we're talking about bottlenecks in growing your team and the status quo of the industry today. The second bullet point that we have, what wise IT providers do different. We've spent a good chunk of time kind of like, yeah, it's tough out there, and this is the reality that you guys are dealing with. Dean, what do we do different?
So the really cool thing about our industry, and genuinely there are not many high skill, potentially high paying industries that we can say this. Quite literally anyone can do this. Think of another industry that has like a skill ceiling that caps out in the multiple six figures, where regardless of where you live, what language you speak, your gender, your like ethnic background, religion, your views, like there is literally no barrier to this. You need to basically have a passion for technology and be able to operate a computer. So I mean, in some cases, you probably, I was going to make a joke that, well, you need hands. You probably don't even need hands. Like there's assistive technology now. Almost anyone can do this. And so I think that uniquely positions our industry to have this sense of built-in equity of opportunity for employment that almost no other industry has.
Right.
And that does allow us to be different, because in almost any sort of, think of this like a sales equation for a minute. Almost any sales equation, you never have access to the total addressable population. You always have to pick a market to work in. It's just not possible. But with IT, you kind of do. You kind of have access as a hiring manager or an employer to literally the entire sample size of humans or intelligent dolphins or monkeys with keyboards that want to work in this space.
Right.
And that means that there's nothing wrong with then figuring out exactly who and what you need to work and to hire and niche down, and your market from that, your sort of total addressable market is massive. And I think that's one of the main things that we could be doing different. A lot of us approach this still like it is 1994. We are hiring a, Unix and Novell system administrator who is going to have a long beard, live in a basement, literally shriek and scream at the light, and will live only on Mountain Dew and Cheetos. And that persona is so far away from what the average person who wants to work in tech looks, acts, thinks like now. It's ridiculous. But a lot of us still approach it like that's the only pool we have to hire from. And if you're listening to this call and you get nothing else out of it, and to maybe recapture anybody who I'm losing here, this is not a DEI statement. This is a pragmatic statement that your next amazing employee will come from whoever you do the best job attracting through your job ad and through your whole process. They do not have to be a white male between the ages of 18 and 30, like this industry has been famous for since the 60s. It just, it isn't even a requirement. We don't even have like a mild handcuff on us. There are related tech industry. Like if I was an electrical engineer, sorry, it's still like a 70-30 graduation ratio. You're probably hiring a dude. You don't even have that problem in IT support. And that should let you understand that if you're sitting there at your MSP saying, I can't find talent, almost certainly it is a you problem, and it is easy to fix because there's just so much. I mean, imagine being in like a monsoon and, having a cup, trying to take a drink of water. Like, are you going to catch some rain? Sure. But like, imagine if you had a kiddie pool. Now imagine if you had like an Olympic size pool and just a straw. Like you could drink water so much quicker because there's so much to capture. And our space is uniquely set up to allow you to have access to whoever the heck you want.
That's right.
Why are you doing that?
That's right. So we've got about 15 minutes left before we're going to start wrapping up. So if you are watching with us right now, And you have a success story of somebody in your business that you hired that status quo we've been talking about was not the case. I'd love for you to just take a moment to write a comment and let us know why it was successful. In your opinion, why? What made the difference? And maybe you've got a track record of doing it well. Please share with the class. We want to know what's working for you. I want to call back as we kind of come into our wrap up here. Something you said earlier when we were kind of briefly circling around the concept of remote work, and you made a reference to culture being a significant reason why that wasn't the answer. Moving remote was not the answer. And you just made a statement that you literally have access to the entire addressable talent pool for your industry at your fingertips. And you made the statement it's about attracting and having a meaningful process to bring the best candidates through that process and into the fold. And I think so much of that is in the DNA of your organization. And if that DNA is not attractive, that could be a major reason why you find yourself talking to some candidates that don't call you back, or you don't even talk to candidates. So I'm a hammer nail guy when it comes to like sales, because that's where I spend so much of my time. But when I talk to a candidate about taking a sales role, one of the things that I ask them is, what are the 3 most important boxes that need to be checked for you in order before you would ever consider giving 40 or more of your hours away, not just to me, but to anybody? You seem highly intelligent, very capable. You could probably go do this job anywhere you wanted, but you're talking to me today. What are the 3 most important boxes that are for you? Because often we go in like, well, what do I need out of an employee? Well, if this person is going to give 40 or more hours of their life to you, Mr. or Mrs. Business Owner or Miss Business Owner, you have suddenly become a major component of this person's life, right? Yep. By default. And you also made a comment earlier, Dean, that salary is not really, for some, on the surface level, it seems like the reason, but it is not the only, and maybe not even the most important reason. So show me, as your candidate I'm about to sign on the dotted line and give you 40 or more of my hours every week for the indefinite future. Why should I be here? And what I seek to do with candidates is help determine in the interview process, where are you today? Like, where are you as a professional in your career, in your life, in your needs, wants, and desires? And where is it that you hope to be? And let's identify alignment between my capacity to help bring you from here to there. And I think it's really important, like, you bring in a tier 1 help desk individual. Are you telling them in the interview process that my goal is not for you to stay right in the trenches for the rest of your life? Are you telling them that? Or is it like, you're going to be chained to tickets till you die or leave, right? Are you setting them up for a career path where they can be like, man, I'm excited to be here because yes, maybe this is rough and uncomfortable now, but I see. But then once you make those promises, you have to have a process by which you deliver them and by which you make them true. How do you feel about that?
So let me ask you a question. You definitely work in what I would consider to be the sales side of the space. Have you ever had a prospect misrepresent a fact or buying opinion to you, where like later on you found out that was either inaccurate or they changed their mind about whatever that was? Have you ever had a prospect in an interview qualifying thing misrepresent something to you?
Well, there's the sales bros have a joke amongst themselves that buyers are liars. That rubs me the wrong way because I don't think it's intentionally deceptive, but in many cases, that happens all the time. Whether intentional or not, something was misrepresented in the sales process. Happens all the time.
Basically, what that comes back to is a lot of times, just as humans, we don't know what we want. And when you're presented in a situation like an interview, like a sales qualification, where you sort of have to objectively in that moment answer that question, especially if you haven't put a lot of thought into it, which most of us haven't, we tend to give just a flat response answer. And it's not always accurate. Sometimes it is a lie. More often than not, it's in that moment what our brain connects to. But the point is, we're almost certainly going to drift from that in reality. And so if you interview, especially somebody who is younger in their career, which is exactly, I think people who are not necessarily young, but newer in their career are good people to bring on to an MSP. Are they really going to necessarily know how to answer that? Probably not. They're going to give you the answer that seems right in the moment. They may not be right at all. They may not know it's right. They may need time working with you to discover that actual truth. So you need to be able to adapt. And so like the example you give of showing them a career path, that is generally true. There are also people who don't want a career path. They'll say to you when they start, I want, eventually I want to be a security engineer and make this money. And then they work on the help desk for 3 to 6 months and they realize that they don't want to put any of the effort in to move to that. And they actually kind of really like tickets and they want to stay where they are, just earn more money.
That's right.
We often don't do a good job. We expect the employee to come tell us that. And if, just like with a sales prospect, if a sales prospect could fully qualify themselves, know exactly what feature, benefit, value they needed, they wouldn't need us. They would just go directly procure. And as managers and hiring managers and leaders, we have to assume all of our people are in that same boat. They don't always know what they want or need, and it can change. And so we have to set up a feedback loop that is comfortable, where we are prompting that from them, observing signs, behavior, language, just like you would in sales. We look for buying language and indicators, looking for that to try and adapt and basically allow this person to always see the most comfortable, if you imagine the most comfortable lazy boy you've ever seen, to look at your company as the warmest, most inviting, luxurious chair every day that they want to sit in. And the minute they get up and start eyeing that couch on the other side of the room, you want to sort of have preemptively been able to determine that so that you can either prepare them to be supremely qualified to leave and go sit in that other chair, or so they remember that, I just kind of needed a blanket. I'm good in this chair. MSPs who, I call it weaponized comfort because I'm a psychopath, but MSPs who focus on employee comfort, not ping pong tables and pizza, but comfort in consistently realigning the relationship to what both parties want, which is dynamic. That's how you get long-term staff. And that's also how you get staff that leave you and still stay loyal and friends to the company, who refer business later, who refer their friends to come work for you.
That's right.
It's not very hard. None of this was go buy a tool or like go read a new book or reinvent your entire philosophy. It's literally talk to people and understand people don't always know what they want, and neither do you, and that's totally fine. And keep an open dialogue and adjust.
That's right. I mean, the most simple way of saying it, which has been said many times before, is be the kind of person you'd want to work for, right? I've had bosses and supervisors in the past who I felt were very unapproachable. And when I did approach them, it was a lot of lip service or, oh, that's very insightful, Jonathan. Thank you. And then the door would close again and then nothing would change, right? Creating space for your team to explore that comfort and discomfort and express discomfort when it's there is key. And the feedback loop you mentioned earlier, also critical. Do you have a process by which feedback is solicited from your team, right? And that, once a quarter, I sit down with everyone on my team and we do a performance review. But I'll give you a little admission here, Dean. It's has very little to do with their performance at all. Yes, we look at numbers against their goals and that stuff to a degree, but that accounts for probably 3% of that meeting. There's a whole other matrix I have them fill out where they grade their satisfaction. I'm one of those things. Are you satisfied with leadership? Are you satisfied with me? On a scale of 1 to 5, how do you feel about this and that and the other thing? And that's a structured feedback loop. Now, there's a way to do that wrong and make that feedback loop actually be a liability. But once again, that's where it comes back to the culture that you build. Like, your people should be attracted to that. It's like, wow, I have a voice. When this is not okay or bad or wrong, I can speak up and that I'm heard. And I know that it's not just lip service, that something will happen. Maybe not to the full degree I expect or hoped or wanted, but we're all human here and we're all on the same team going the same direction. Can you say that about your people? Are you all on the same team going the same direction? Because it's your responsibility as the leader to create that space and facilitate that vision and put the process in place that's going to help move you from that status quo to where you guys are trying to go together. We're wrapping up here. We got about 3 to 4 minutes left. Guys, if you're watching the stream, you've got an expert here at your disposal for the next few minutes. This is a great opportunity to drop some questions in the chat for Dean or myself. Or if you're watching this back later on YouTube, feel free to leave a comment or let us know what you thought of this. Dean, trends in technology hiring, that's our final bullet point. I don't know that we can deliver on it in 5 minutes. But what do you see out there?
I am, of course, seeing what we always see whenever the industry gets hyped up on a new piece of technology. We get a bunch of completely overvalued, overpaid roles in that. Right now, it's AI stuff that will cool off eventually. Bear in mind that ultimately, any doomsaying you see that says that any form of technology is going to push humans out of any industry has objectively been incorrect since the dawn of human history. Technology has changed the way humans interact with industries, but it has never pushed humans out of an industry entirely or in often cases at all. So keep that in mind if you are a hiring manager and you think, oh, sweet, like the latest automation means I can fire my team. Probably not. And if you're an employee and you're like, oh, no, it's not worth learning or investing in, this new skill set because that job will be gone in 2 years. Also, probably not. Bakeries still exist, and we have been harvesting and processing grain into flour since before we could record history. As an example, fine, now a lot of that uses machinery to increase the scale, but think of how many farms there are on the planet. There are more people objectively involved with farming now than there have ever been in the history of human history, even though it was more manually intensive in the past. So you're going to be good for a long time, as long as we don't run out of room for stuff. I guess if we run out of space on the planet, you're screwed. And if we haven't moved to other planets by that point, it'll be the Moore's law of employment will catch us. Right. But that's probably the biggest trend. If you want a couple of just really quick actionable tips, if you're listening here, if you are struggling to hire, the biggest single thing you can focus on, your job posting should be a job advertisement selling your business to a candidate. This is a sales endeavor. This is marketing. You are not doing someone a favor by hiring them. So that job advertisement should not be a job description, and it should encapsulate as quickly and as close to the top of it, because ain't no one got time to read, what working for you is like. Get me excited. I am a buyer you are attracting. Get me pumped. I want to buy from you. Every stage of that process, from when a candidate first applies to when you either then offer them a job or decline the job, make me feel like I am winning. Validate me at every point that my choice to engage with you was the right choice, exactly the same way you would in a good selling cycle. Your buyer would the entire way leave every interaction thinking, I was right to spend that time with Jonathan today. I was right to sign that quote. I was right to write them in their first check. You want to give that validation to that employee. And one of the easiest ways you can do that is just be excited about it. Even if it's fake, just be excited. And when someone starts their first week, you have a one-time opportunity, just like you will with a customer onboarding, to give that person the biggest single validating dopamine rush they've ever had in their life, and make them feel for that first week they are the single most important human being on the face of the planet, and everything that led up to them starting to work at your company was so empirically correct that any other decision other than working for you was a bad one. You want someone to feel that good about coming to work for you. If you start off an engagement that way, the relationship is up here. You really have to F it up to get to a point where that person in their first year is just going to quit with no notice and go somewhere else. So let's start doing that, my friends. It's actually a lot of fun as well. I'll just point out, if you start approaching hiring that way, you will have more fun because it just feels better. It doesn't feel gross. You feel like you're starting a relationship with a friend. And to an extent, it's very similar to that. So put that energy in. Make that candidate, that new hire, really feel like they won the lottery by just choosing to come work for you.
I agree so much, Dean. This has been incredible. Thank you so much for joining us today on Skofi Sessions. If you are watching this today or you're watching the recording back later, we are grateful for you. Thank you for spending some time with Dean and I. Hopefully you got some benefit out of this. I'm about to end the stream. There'll be a QR code where you can go follow us on other spaces. And Dean, again, thank you so much, and we'll catch you all next time.
Heck yeah. Thanks for having me.